And I have to begin to say I'm profoundly disappointed that the Minister for Housing has not turned up for this motion and has not indeed sent a minister from his department either. It shows the contempt that the Minister for Housing has for us raising the issues on this. He won't even come into this House to hear us on this. I'm deeply disappointed about that, and he has given no notice about that whatsoever. I have to say what the government is proposing to do here is absolutely simply outrageous. The government is going to gift €450 million of the hard-earned money of the public to developers. This is a harebrained idea. It's a bonanza for developers. They want to give up to €144,000 per apartment to private developers of public money. To put that figure in context in terms of apartments, last year an investment fund bought in Limerick City a number of apartments. It's good to see the Minister has arrived.
Thanks, Cian. Usually it was like a minute.
Okay, well, we were told that he was dealing with it. Apologies for that. Yeah, so it is good that you've arrived. Now, okay, that is good. Now, if you can stop interrupting, I'm speaking. Thank you, Minister. To put that figure in context, last year an investment fund in Limerick City bought apartments for less than €168,000 per apartment. Despite this large subsidy that the government is giving to developers, these apartments are going to be sold at full market price. There will be no discount, no affordability built in. According to analysis by Killian Woods in the Business Post, only the top 14% of households in terms of income will be able to afford these prices. What does it say about a government that is willing to spend €450 million guaranteeing the profits of developers to provide apartments for people on the highest incomes in Ireland? Whose side is this government on? People across the country are struggling to heat their homes, put food on the table, struggling to pay rent and pay bills. What planet is this government on that thinks it's okay to use the public money to fund a €450 million giveaway to developers? The one thing that is guaranteed under this scheme is the profits of developers. It's an outrageous use of public funds to subsidise these profits. It is, in my view, gross misuse of public money that could be better spent in so many ways. This is yet another bailout for developers, but not only does the state bail out developers when property prices collapse, we now live in a country where the state bails out developers when property prices in apartments have reached all-time highs. Is there any other country in the world where the government does this? And the Minister in his remarks may tell us what other countries in the world does this. I look forward to hearing about this. That is a win-win for developers. It is yet again the government gifting public funds and resources to private interests with complete disregard for the public interest. It really is an act of daylight robbery, taking from the people and giving to developers. How can the government possibly justify this? This is granting a developer's wish list. Not content with the reduction in apartment standards that were brought in to make construction apparently viable, not content with the even lower standards that were brought in for the build-to-rent schemes apparently to make apartment construction viable, the government is now going to give huge cash grants to make construction of apartments viable. How many times will these same lines be trotted out to justify making regressive changes that benefit developers? Each time we are told that this will sort out the viability problem, and each time the lobbyists come back demanding more. All the while, apartments have become less and less affordable for people. When will the government ever learn? There are three questions that I would like the Minister to answer in his contribution today. And the first is, where did this idea come from for these large subsidies for developers? Was it something that the Minister dreamed up himself? Was it something that developers and their lobbyists asked for? Where did the idea come from? We know it doesn't come from good practice in other countries. Other countries simply don't do this. This is an off-the-wall policy. When other countries invest in housing, they do so to make sure that it's more affordable, not less affordable, as this scheme will. My second question is, why was no economic evaluation or analysis or regulatory assessment carried out to examine what effect this scheme would have and what effect these sorts of subsidies would have? Has any modelling been done on how this will affect land prices? Will that modelling be published if it has been done? And what is going to happen to the prices of these sites once these subsidies are secured? And we are going to see at that point, we're going to see some of the developers flip these sites once they've secured these subsidies. And the scheme actually allows for that, because the funding is attached to the company or the proposer. And of course, the developers in most of these sites set up companies which they can then sell on and flip. So the scheme actually allows for the sites to be flipped and for the companies that hold these subsidies to be flipped on, which will inflate land prices. So this will have a knock-on effect on land prices, and then that will have a knock-on effect on the full market price of apartments, pushing them up. Incredibly, at the Housing Committee last week, last Cancórla, the Minister conceded that he wasn't going to use tax incentives in this area because they're a bad idea, and I agree with him on that. But to conclude that tax incentives wouldn't be a good policy solution, but that cash subsidies somehow are, I think is an incredible leap. The third question I have that I hope that the Minister will answer is what level of profit for developers will be guaranteed under this scheme. Will the minimum 15% profit level that developers say is necessary for apartment construction to be viable, will that be subsidised by the use of public funds? What controls are there in this scheme? I couldn't find any in terms of the assessment process of applications to ensure that these subsidies will not be used to subsidise profits for developers. And one of the reasons that developers say a minimum 15% profit is necessary in terms of viability on this scheme is they say that they have a high level of risk when it comes to construction and development of apartments. Now, this scheme is removing that risk for developers. In fact, if prices go down, the subsidies in the scheme will increase up to the threshold of 144,000. That is in your, I don't know if you've read your documents, Minister, it's in them. So how can the government justify using public money to underpin these level of profits for developers while at the same time removing most of the risk? We've had last Cancórla over the last decade a disaster in terms of housing policies. Rents have doubled, house prices have become more unaffordable and have risen 15% in the last year and about to pass their Celtic Tiger peak. Rents and house prices in Ireland and Dublin especially are amongst the highest in the European Union. Homelessness has skyrocketed. It has increased by 22% in the last year alone. And under this government and the last few governments, the rates of home ownership have fallen year after year. There is an alternative to what the government are proposing here that could see these homes built. At a fraction of the cost, the state could buy out these sites and planning permissions and ensure true financing from the Housing Finance Agency that affordable, much needed affordable purchase and cost rental homes are provided on these sites. Instead, that would provide the additional supply that is needed. It would also create downward pressure on rents and house prices, and crucially this would mean more homes available to rent and buy at prices that people can afford. The government could also bring in a zoning for affordable housing with price caps built into the zonings, which should be introduced and has worked very effectively in cities like Vienna. This is one of the reasons why, for example, in Vienna you're able to rent a new two-bedroom apartment near the city centre in Vienna for about €650 a month, about half of what the cost rental rents are here. So in conclusion, I'm asking the Minister to use this time to tell us where did this idea for large subsidies come from? Was it the Minister's idea or did it come from lobbying from developers? Why has there been no economic evaluation of this scheme carried out? How much will it increase land prices and what knock-on effect will this have on the prices of apartments? And how much of profits of developers will they make from these subsidies? And why is public money being used to guarantee these profits while also reducing and eliminating much of the risk? I want the Minister to use some of his time to answer these questions. I think the public have a right to get information to that and get those answered. And I think you owe the public, given that you want to gift €450 million of their money to developers, you owe them answers on these questions. Gurv Magat.